So now for the introduction of our speaker. Tim Keller was born and raised in Albuquerque, is an Eagle Scout and a Kellogg Foundation Race Equity Fellow. He graduated from St. Pius High School, attended University of Notre Dame, where he studied finance, art, and history, and earned an MBA with honors from the Harvard Business School. Tim spent 15 years in the private sector, starting with Fortune 500 companies. He also lived in Cambodia for several years, where he ran the nation's first IT social enterprise, focused on hiring landmine victims and other disadvantaged persons. After a successful business career, Tim refocused his professional life on tackling some of the biggest issues facing Albuquerque and New Mexico. Throughout his public service, from 2 terms as state senator for Albuquerque's International District, to New Mexico State Auditor, to Mayor of Albuquerque, Tim has consistently challenged the status quo and developed a track record of real impact. Tim became Albuquerque's mayor on December 1st, 2017, after garnering 62% of the vote. Tim is also a devotee of heavy metal music and enjoys art, the outdoors, and food. He lives in Albuquerque with his wife, Elizabeth, and their 2 children, Maya and Jack. Please help me welcome Mayor Tim Keller.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everybody. We have lots, I think, of fun pictures to share with you this morning. That's what this presentation is going to be all about. I know last time we met, I was just elected, and we had a nice kind of formal speech. This is going to be a little bit different, but we're going to touch on a lot of areas. And before I want to get started, though, I do want to mention, I know there's been a lot of intros, and I always appreciate the way the Economic Forum runs a tight ship. And so I think there were 2 folks that I just want to highlight before we get going that I believe haven't been introed. One is we have the city's guest. We do actually some business with Singapore. And we have the regional Singapore representative with us, Eugene Kwok. Eugene, are you in here? Right there. Eugene, thanks for being here. And also, I'm going to talk a little bit about local contracting. And the person who does this at the city, I want to introduce in case you want to talk with her after. Haley is here. Haley Kadish, right there. Local contracting, talk to her after. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. The first picture that I want to share with you, we'll make sure we have it right there. How many of you have been to a United game? All right, we got some United fans in here. You have felt the power of this experience. And it is a powerful experience. In fact, it very much lives up to the name United. This is a really interesting story, I think, in many ways, because it's indicative of a lot of things about our city, actually. And when we first had this opportunity, the ownership and some of the folks involved with this came to the city and they said, hey, we want to bring a soccer team to Albuquerque and we need some help getting the Isotope Stadium to work out and things like this. And when they shared that story or they put in that request, all of a sudden our city was kind of the opposite of united. There was this skepticism that we've heard many times for many projects. It was like, well, we've done soccer before, why don't we try something else? I've got a better idea. And we went down this chain of sort of skepticism and doubt. And at the end of the day, we decided, it wasn't our idea at all. We think we can make it work. Hopefully it'll work this time because the last several incarnations we didn't pan out quite as good. And it has worked. We decided to make a small, at least at the city, a small $350,000 bet on the price to remove the pitching mound at Isotopes Park. And that has enabled, along with, of course, all the people actually doing the work to get this team out there, 15,000 fans on average every game. They sell out weeks in advance now. And you see folks going to this from all walks of life. It is truly uniting our city. And that is a very special thing. And I think it's an important lesson for us that we actually are capable of more as a city. And if we can push past some of that initial skepticism, some of that initial jockeying over whose idea it was, I believe we actually can be united in making this a much, much better city. So I want to share with you today a couple of examples of that, and then actually a couple of examples where we've still got a ways to go in terms of coming together as a city. Now, this next slide is an example of our crime situation. And the clicker's got a little bit of a delay here, so you're going to get a preview, and then I'll try and go this is, my surprises are quickly disappearing. But, okay, stop there. All right. Look at all those red dots. This is, by the way, for those of you, that's the shape of Albuquerque. Some people are like, what is that? Albuquerque is not shaped like we think it is because of Los Ranchos and the South Valley and things like this. This is a crime map for, I think it was 2017 to 2018 in Albuquerque. So people ask me, they're always, Mayor, where is crime the worst? Where do we have to focus? Where do we have to focus with a map like this, right? Everywhere. This is the reality in our city. And there are some things we're doing that I'm going to get to, but I don't want to lose sight of where we are. Crime is everywhere. I mean, it's even, like, look at Mesa del Sol's got some dots. I was trying to figure out who doesn't. The State Fair seems to so far not have an incident yet. That's about it. So this is the reality of the situation with crime. And I believe where we are coming together as a city and with the county and with the DA's office and with children, youth, and families and everyone involved in law enforcement is we're getting past the idea that a task force is going to fix this. Or the idea that a particular set of analysis, like if only we had more data. You don't need data to understand this problem. This is a problem that has to be addressed from all sides. All of those things, all of the analysis, all of the agencies, all of the task forces, and we've got to be doing it together. And I think we are starting to do that in our city. So this is a picture of our downtown policing district. And this is the prototype model for how we are trying to do this differently in our city, how we're trying to police differently in our city. And there's a couple of things about this picture that I do want to explain. One, you see two officers on bikes. And so as a point, by the way, we are announcing today that now every area command will have a bike patrol. So that is great news for our city. Now, the reason why bikes are so important is because it breaks down the barrier typically between the officer and the public, which is usually the car. Or if it's an incident, obviously it's a little different. But we've realized, and it's an age-old lesson, it goes back to like the 1800s. If you want officers in the community to talk with each other, they can't be behind a door. And so the bike is actually this gateway where you're allowing enough mobility so the officers can get around, but you're also enabling the opportunity for folks to actually talk to each other. And that's what's happening right here. And this woman, actually, she has just gotten out of jail. She's recently been incarcerated, and she's hanging out at Alvarado at the bus stop, right? We know this happens. We see this all the time. You can't really tell in this picture. She also has a medical bracelet on. She's been in the hospital recently. And so what our officers are doing is two things that is very, very different. First off, they're engaging in a conversation, right? They're not actually arresting her or pushing her aside or doing anything like that. So they're trying to get her help. That's what's really happening here. And they actually offered her, they tried to figure out like which bus route would get her to an apartment where she had a friend and this kind of thing. But what are they also doing, right? They're protecting us, because this is the type of situation, especially because of addiction, and I'm making an assumption that might have had something to do with the hospital band. This is the kind of situation that, because of addiction, turns a very different path if no one talks to her. And so also for everyone else around, are they worried about this woman anymore, right? Are they concerned about vagrancy or who knows what all they might be assuming? No, because those officers are engaging. Now, we are doing this across departments downtown. It's not just the police department, and this is another very, very big difference that demonstrates the concept of community policing. Our downtown district also includes the fire department, who is doing paramedic triage to folks who are down and out. They're also dealing with the businesses, working on how they can have a business frontage that is the sort of least conducive to vagrancy, but the most conducive to eyes on the street to prevent crime. And then we even have our solid waste department as part of the team, who's actually coming by and cleaning up the place after the bar nights on Friday and Saturday. And then we also have a social worker who is going around to these individuals, connecting them with services. This is the beginning of a community policing model that we are trying to roll out throughout the city in ways that fit different neighborhoods. And so we've started this also at Central and Unser, for those of you who might live out on the west side. And we've seen tremendous drops in crime in these areas. And now we just started, of course, Nob Hill a couple of months ago. And we want to have multiple of these all over the city. But we can't do that unless we have extra resources. Because fundamentally, this model is also about proactive policing. And, which, by the way, we're pulling people over again. So if you're, don't speed, because we will actually pull you over. This has been key, actually, to getting stolen cars and getting folks with warrants out off the street, is just pulling people over. But we're also trying to have these kinds of interactions that are not just answering calls. Because think of all those red dots. Our officers are responding to calls from the minute they check in. There is literally no time to do proactive community policing because they're constantly just answering calls that are coming in from 911 or 242 cops. So the only way to get around this is to have more resources so that we can free up folks to do this kind of work. And that's why you hear me talk about the need for additional officers. And when I say officers, it's not just officers like frontline officers. It's all the specialists in between. So it's folks who are doing crimes against children. It's folks who are doing cold case detective work. All of that has to go up so that we can free people up to do proactive community policing. Now, there's some good news here. First, we got our 100th officer. We're trying to do 100 a year to get to 400. We got our 100th officer sworn in Monday. That is a great thing for our city. Thank you. And I think the best news, which is, in many ways, we all hope just the beginning. I want to acknowledge it's just the beginning. But for the first time in many years, we think almost a decade, every crime category went down last year. I hope we have turned the corner. So we have a long ways to go. There's no doubt about that, because that map still pretty much looks like that. But if we are going the right direction, we are eventually going to get where we need to go when it comes to crime. But part of thinking about crime from all sides is also trying to understand the connection with our children. And for us, I think we've all seen before, we see this in many ways in law enforcement, but also with education. Our school district is what it is. It's APS, and when I was a state senator, I used to really hold them accountable. And when I was auditor, I was equally as harsh on them. But I will tell you, as mayor, I think my role is much, much different. It is not to blame or point fingers at anyone anymore. It doesn't matter if it's judges or if it's APS. It's my job to step up and try and help. That fundamentally is, I think, also a concept that we are uniting around as a city. This picture, I think, demonstrates a little bit of how this is working. Now, just to let folks know, because I know it's a little small in the back, but this pyramid thing, this is a pool, one of our city pools. And this pyramid thing in the pool is like a rock climbing wall that floats. And by the way, I think kids of all ages, this is really fun. If you see one of these, give it a shot. Because of course it tips over and you fall over and get in the water. It's great. But this is a great example of where we are trying to step up and support APS, and in a very indirect but powerful way, try and get our kids out of, unfortunately, a path that can often lead to a situation that leads to public safety challenges. And so basically for us, it's stepping up where we can, and that is after school and over the summer. And so this is a picture of one of our summer programs. And our summer programs, we work with the county, we work with APS, and we work with YMCA all together, and all of the other different groups, Boys Club. We have a children's cabinet that tries to coordinate opportunities for kids so that we make sure that every kid can do something after school and every kid can stay active and engaged over the summer. And the results so far, I think, are also going to make a difference in the next generation. So this summer, we had 24,000 kids go through our summer programs. That is a third of the students at APS. that has to be a good thing for our kids and for their parents. And to unpack this a little bit, we gave out 80,000 pool passes. 80,000, that is one for every kid in APS. That shows you the demand for these kinds of activities. And I got to tell you, as a dad of a 3 and a 5-year-old, and also those of you parents, grandparents, this is a major help to parents during the summer too. We all know this dynamic. School gets out, it's like, what are you doing with your kids? And so we want to say as a city, we'll take care of them. We're going to make sure they have fun. They're going to get engaged. They're going to make friends. They're going to have role models that are outside the family, which sometimes is very important. We're going to give them a place to go where they're safe and where they're fed, which again doesn't always happen in the home in Albuquerque. And we're going to keep them out of trouble. That's what this is all about. And so far, we've been very pleased to actually increase 10, 20, 30% every category we've looked at for this. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later, but this, I believe, is key to supporting each other, to uniting around our children, instead of just saying someone else has to do better. And I'm going to need your help on this initiative, which I'll talk about in a little bit later. But let's talk about the economy a little bit. When we think about public safety, obviously, the best thing is to have a vibrant economy also. That is never lost on me. And so the question is also, what are we doing? How are we uniting together, or how are we not with respect to our economy? And how many of you have seen these signs around town? You've seen them? Who knows what they are? I know some people do. I see Alicia Keys out there. So the good news is I think a lot of people actually don't know what these are. It took me actually to become mayor to learn what these signs are. And so I used to see them and I'd be like, what is going on? I could never figure out like what's Kiki. I'd always wondered that. And this is the sign of economic development today in Albuquerque. So these are film production, filming, location sign, directional signs. Those of you who are Breaking Bad fans, the one in the middle is WW. It's Walter White. That was the Breaking Bad sign. So when you see these signs up in town, quietly celebrate and cheer because it's economic development. It's jobs of all types that are now supporting what is the fastest growing industry in our state and in our city. Now, for us too, I think this is really important because in many ways these signs are a reflection of the two biggest announcements that our state and our city and our county have made in several years with respect to jobs. And so if you didn't notice, we now have 2 internationally renowned studios right here in Albuquerque. That is an amazing thing. Now, this accomplishment, in some ways, there's always a little bit of luck involved. But in other ways, I also just want to share with you a quick story. It's also part of a focused effort. Our administration is trying to focus on areas in our economy where we have a competitive advantage. And that means that we want everyone to succeed. But in terms of your tax dollars, where we put our subsidies, we're trying to focus specifically on growth sectors both that we can import in with the help of AED, and also growth sectors that are already here that we can retain and help grow. And the film industry is one of the biggest examples of that. And so if we look at the math on how this is playing out, I believe there is a story here that is one of impact and something that we're actually going to feel. If you look at the businesses on your left-hand side, these are the businesses that our city and the mayor's administration has signed off on LEDA funding for and supported in other meaningful financial incentive ways. And all of them, for the most part, I think, fit exactly that category, right? These are homegrown companies. You recognize some of them, Risk Sense. There's a lot of local ones in here. I think the county is also doing Rose's Paper, which is actually a big manufacturing operation. So we're trying to focus these efforts on those companies that are growing here, but also on these ones that are coming and providing additional jobs. And if you tally up the numbers, $7.5 million in public investments since our administration took over. And the average wage is $52,000. This is another key thing that I wanted to look at when I became mayor, because I believe we should be subsidizing jobs that have a higher wage rate than the median wage, so that we lift up the average wage for all the city. And so far, we've been able to do this in a big way. And in total, this is 3,200 jobs. Now, obviously, most of those are coming from the film industry, and they continue to come thanks to the work of Alicia Keys, who left the city and set a lot of this up, but we love that she's at the state. So we're going to continue on that front, but I want to highlight all these local companies too, because that is a huge part of the package. Now, then you add in our anchor institutions and what they're doing, which frankly we had almost nothing to do with, but I'm going to take credit for it anyway. And so Sandia Labs, 1,900 jobs. You see the wages there, 300 jobs is Intel. You add this together. We are looking at $475 million in annual new wages in the Albuquerque, central New Mexico area. We have to feel that, right? That has got to help the economy. So I'm very optimistic, actually, in what we're doing when it comes to economic development, because I think this focused approach is actually going to make a difference when it comes to all of our lives in terms of the businesses that we run. Now, the second piece of this is public investment in physical projects, right, in infrastructure. And so this is the other side of the coin. This is essentially construction, real estate development projects. And there's a few other ones that aren't on the map because I ran out of room. Because this story, I think, is also one that folks will appreciate because of the impact I believe it's going to have. People tell me, like, I don't really see a lot of new construction projects in Albuquerque. I got to tell you, I'm not really sure that's true. Look at this map. These are projects that we are focusing on with the same lens, which is that essentially we want to get projects done. We want to push them out the door. Some of these projects have been around for 10 years. I think the Central and Unser project might go back to Mayor Baca. We're finally getting that thing done. That's Nuevo Atrisco. We are looking at things like the Highlands, if you're not familiar with this project. This one is out across from Presbyterian Hospital. It is huge. In total, it's actually going to be $90 million. It is going to revitalize the entire area between UNM and Edo. These are, again, projects that have been working on multiple years. And they come to us and they say, well, we have this planning challenge, or we have this funding gap for like $500,000. This is where we're saying, you know what? We're just going to say yes. We're not going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We're just going to say, that's a good project, we're going to fund it. Even though I don't like the color of a particular project, or I'd like a nicer bridge over Central, which are all real things, we're just going to do them anyway. So, by the way, they are going to do that bridge over Central. It's going to be great. But this, I think, is just a harbinger of what's going to come. And so for the Railyards, too, and I know we have C&M here, we just got awarded a top prize. It's a small grant to get started, $300,000 to get the Railyard, to get C&M's film program inside the Railyards. And you layer that with the fact that we're investing $14 million in finally remediating that and getting it ready to actually lease. I believe in the near future, we are all going to have things to do at the Railyards. We're going to see people there all the time, activating a whole huge swath of our city that hasn't been activated in decades. And so when you put this together, you get almost $500 million in capital investment. That, I think, also is very, very meaningful. So when you put these together, our economic growth rate historically for the last few years has been about 1.3%, 1.5%, 1.7%. This is why we have this sort of slow, flat line approach. Last year we hit 2.5. Percentage-wise, by the way, that is a huge amount of growth. I've got to believe we're going to break 3. And I know I'm celebrating a low number, but I'm going to celebrate it anyway. When you've got $500 million in annual wages and $500 million in capital investment, I believe in the growth potential of our city. Now, let's talk a little bit about small business. And Bob, I'm watching the clock, so I'm going to go a little fast because I know we started a little late. But this is a picture of a business called Stride. They do office supplies, and they also hire folks with various disabilities, developmental disabilities, and they essentially supply office supplies. And this picture is important because I want to talk a little bit about small business. Small business is somewhere where I believe we have a long ways to go because everyone is doing their part who tries to help small businesses. But I know at the city we've got a long ways to go. When I was state auditor, and I know our auditor is here with us today, it's good to see him, we have, used to do these reports on how much money we'd spend out of state. Well, I still do them at the city, and at the city, we spend about $200 million a year on out-of-state companies. And some of them are for things like office supplies that we mail order them. And so we could get them from Stride. And we are trying to systematically go through every contract we do. And now we're looking at $2 million, which for Stride is a huge deal, to supply office supplies for the city of Albuquerque. So we're starting this process. We're just below 10 million when it comes to swapping out local for out-of-state contracts. We have a long, long ways to go. And I found out that it is really, really hard because of things like the procurement code and all these bureaucratic challenges that small businesses can't deal with. So that's why we're doing two things going forward. One, we're creating a small business advocacy center to literally help folks who can't afford a great lawyer or a great accountant to get all of the different compliance issues in order to get these competitive bids. But we're also going to try and have the JTIP program, which all of you know, I think, in this room. We're going to do it at the city level. So we're going to say, what does it take for you to hire one more person? That's this concept of an increment of one. And we will help you get them trained up and learn how to get those city contracts and actually help your small business expand. So that's the next piece of the puzzle that we're going to start working on this year. Now, I do want to talk about another area where we've got some work to do. And this is some of you might have seen this map. This is what we're going to do with the art project. Just kidding. I saw some panicked faces there. The art project, by the way, is on schedule, and now we have buses we can depend on. We're going to get that thing started this winter, so everything's a green light for that. So I think that's a good thing for our city. That's good. I see some claps there. I can't wait to get that started. Now, with this map here, what this actually is a story of our homeless challenge. So I know the font's a little bit small, but if you think about the journey that an individual has to take who's suffering from homelessness right now, they have all of these providers that will give you lunch, they'll give you dinner, you can sleep there at night. There's actually dozens of well-intentioned faith-based organizations, nonprofits that work with our homeless community every day. And they do everything they can to help with this problem. But we know, based on our point-in-time count, we are getting 500 more homeless folks every year in Albuquerque over the last few years. This problem is getting worse, it is not getting better, and it's not going away. It's primarily a function of the fact that we are the largest city in the entire region, in 1,000 square miles. We are going to get homeless folks until America can figure out what to do with homeless folks. But it's our responsibility to do something about it. And this challenge right here is very prescient because there's also this issue about a person not only having to go to all these different areas physically, but there's these bizarre gates that are all over, meaning you have to, like, lunch is at one place and it's only for families. Or I can sleep here if I'm a man, but if I'm a woman, I have to go way over on the other side of town. Or if I have an addiction problem, which a lot of our folks do, or a mental health problem, I can't get into any of those facilities. Or even at the time of day. If I want to go to almost all of these places on the weekend, they're closed. If I want to go somewhere at night, they're closed except for those different areas that I mentioned where you have to fit a certain criteria. So what happens to our city? We get Coronado Park. That is the clearinghouse for our homeless challenge, where everyone is then connected to all the services. The system is telling us the gap in the system. And so I believe we've got to have somewhere where people can go to get the help they need with no barrier. And this also means so that officers, if they have to take someone somewhere, it's not jail and it's not the emergency room, because right now that is their only alternative. So the concept is to step up as a city, just like every other city, major city in America has done. We have to build, we have to provide services in a place or a couple of places where folks can then get all the services that are already out there. And that also means law enforcement has a place to take folks that is not jail or the emergency room. And that's the same with paramedics. So you will see on the ballot, I need your help with this in November, we are asking you for $14 million to get this started. And I got to tell you, it's not like I dreamt as a kid of running for office and building a homeless shelter. But I will tell you, it is what we need right now in Albuquerque. And I believe we can all try in our own way as hard as we can to deal with this issue. It will not help until we do this. So we've got to come together as a city to do this. I think we have a whole advisory program and plan. You're going to see all the schematics on how this is all going to work. But I believe we have to step up and finally do this as a city of Albuquerque. Now, for us too, we're going to try and also ask for each individual's help for homeless vouchers. Vouchers are the cheapest way to deal with this problem. The problem is they only can really help usually about 20% of the population, but we believe we can take 1,000 people right out of this and just give them a place to live, typically an apartment, and you push the services then into that apartment. This is the only proven model around the country. We have a demand right now which is way higher than our supply. And so we're actually starting a foundation, the One Albuquerque City Foundation, that is going to be working on how to just get folks to try and amp up all that we're doing for homeless vouchers. And we want to show you, instead of handing money out the door of your car, give it to a homeless voucher, and we will show you family by family the people that we house. That's what's going to be coming this year in Albuquerque. Now, let me, I think, wrap things up, hopefully just on time, with a little bit about the rest of our future. This is, by the way, a new sculpture on Civic Plaza, if you haven't seen it. And it's meant to be climbed on, and it's a lot of fun. You can hardly tell, but the letter is about the height of a person, so it's very tall. And you're not supposed to climb on the top part, but at night everyone does and takes selfies with it, and it's a lot of fun. So this concept is about coming together as a city and owning our challenges. It's about acknowledging the problems that we have in our community and acknowledging the challenges that all of the different forms of government and agencies have. But it's about saying, how can we help? How can we help actually take responsibility for fixing those challenges? And I think it's also about taking action. In each one of these areas, there are better ideas out there in almost everything that I mentioned. But they're either going to take too long, or we don't have everything ready to actually get them done. And so there is a bias towards action that I believe in. And I think that is also something we've got to continue to push throughout our city. And I am optimistic about Albuquerque because I got to tell you, I have seen this work, not just in the examples that I've shown, but also when it comes to things like the senior games. If anyone didn't see this, what our city pulled off, 20,000 visitors, 28 million in economic impact at like 70 locations all over the city, and we did it without a hitch. Every single person who came here was like, this is a great place that I would come back to and I would move to. There wasn't even one news story of a person having a bad experience. That's unbelievable. We will celebrate that. And so I believe this is a journey we're on together, but it's also going to take resolve. It is a long journey, and it's going to take a sustained effort over time. But if we keep doing this, I believe the examples that I've shown you, the ideas that I've shared with you, are really going to make this a much, much better city. It's going to help us achieve the potential that I know we've always had. And I know this, we are just getting started. So with that, Bob, I'm going to hand it back to you. Time permitting, all yours. Thank you.